Good evening, everyone. Thank you for returning for this important panel. I know that the timing of it probably in terms of 6:30 is probably dinner time, but so we appreciate you moving your dinner a little bit later tonight, or maybe you already had it. Okay, I'm John Falcione, the Executive Director and CEO of BMES, and I want to welcome you to a most important conversation here this evening, focused on, of course, how to rethink the grants model, which has been such an important part of your work life for so many years. So before I introduce our impressive moderator, and then they'll introduce the panelists for tonight, I just want to spend a couple of minutes providing some context. So as most of you in the audience know better than I do, for a long time, universities have come to rely on federal research funding to support scientific medical research. But as we know, earlier this year, the Trump administration announced that it was terminating billions of dollars in grants, mainly but not exclusively from the NIH, the NSF, and the DOE. These cuts represent reductions in support for early-stage research, which underpins future advancements and threatens the very thing that the administration fosters, which is American competitiveness. Both directly and indirectly, the cuts also impact STEM areas, which hampers the progress of the overall tech workforce pipeline. Ultimately, the impact of these cuts will be felt in healthcare and patient outcomes. So our current funding model can be traced back to 1930, when Congress elevated what was then called the Hygienic Laboratory to the National Institutes of Health, giving the Institute broader authority to conduct biomedical research and establish a system of research fellowships. The model that emphasized federal research funding began after World War II, when a former dean of MIT's engineering school, Vannevar Bush, who was now head of the U.S. Office of Science, Research, and Development, called on the U.S. to fund basic research in the physical and medical sciences in order to ensure American strength and progress. The debate then, as it is now, was whether federal funds should be allocated for basic research or applied research. Bush successfully argued that investing in science around particular goals was limiting, and that basic research is what would lead to discoveries and applications that would help the country. After World War II, Congress provided additional authorities to the NIH for disease control and patient care. Research grants were also formalized during this period. In a recent poll we conducted, and which you can read in our new Pipeline to Progress page on bmes.org, nearly 75 of respondents said that they have received federal funding for BME research within the last 5 years. And when asked how much of their current research is supported by federal funding, 26 said all of it, 38% said nearly all of it, most, and 16 said some. Only about 20% said none.
If there was no biomedical engineering, the world is going to look very different as soon as you open your eyes. The world would look blurry, right? It would look blurry because there's so many people that wear glasses and contact lenses. Within minutes of waking up, biomedical engineering has touched the lives of most people in some way or another.
So this is why we launched this week a public awareness campaign called The World Without Biomedical Engineering. We ask you to learn more about this initiative and to join us in our efforts to give more visibility to the work that biomedical engineers and clinicians and others allied to the field do. We ask you to share with us the stories that demonstrate the impact of research and patient outcomes. The next phase of our initiative will be to form an alliance that includes the ecosystem as we see it, which includes industry, universities, government agencies, clinicians, foundations, investors, other nonprofits, and those who are allied to our field. Our big, hairy, audacious goal is to prompt the declaration of a National Biomedical Engineering Day. This year has challenged you to change the way you fund the work that you do. We hope that this conversation here tonight helps you to think a little bit differently about the options that you can consider. So with that, it's my pleasure now to introduce the moderator of this evening's conversation, Holly Smithson. So I'll tell you a little bit about Holly's remarkable background. She is the CEO of Athena, which works to advance women in STEM and drive gender equality across global industries. Under her leadership, Athena is emerging as a global force dedicated to equip female leaders and male allies to succeed in science and technology fields. Holly's career spans transformative roles, including leading the launch, merger, and financial turnaround of 3 companies in clean tech, biotech, and STEM. Previously, Holly served as a presidential appointee in President George W. Bush's administration, advancing critical legislative initiatives at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and State Department. She was also a delegate in California Governor Jerry Brown's clean tech trade mission to China. Her exceptional leadership has earned widespread recognition. Holly delivered the acclaimed TEDx San Diego talk, Uncaging the Confidence Within, where she explored the mindset that shifts the mindset shifts that fuel personal transformation and courageous leadership. So please help me welcome the moderator, Holly Smithson, and our panel tonight.
All right, good evening, everyone. I am just really, let me just start off by telling you how impressed I am that you are swapping out your dinner for what I'm going to characterize as one hell of a feast of a conversation tonight. I want to see, before we jump in and introduce our august panel, I'd like to see with a show of hands how many recipients of research funding, federal research funding, by way of hands. How many folks have, let me see. Okay, all right. So we're on a journey. We are on a very disorienting journey by most standards, by most definitions. And what I would submit, the most important thing as we navigate this new world order, this new landscape, is that we do it in community. And I really want to commend John and Biomedical Engineering Society for holding these conversations. Because a lot of times when we're faced with such dramatic change, there can be this notion to self-isolate or to kind of be in a state of paralysis. And the idea that we're all gathered here in this convention, excuse me, to figure out new ways of funding, I think is pretty extraordinary. So Captain Obvious remark on that. I'm joined on my stage, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves, but we have some really fantastic institutions and organizations that are going to be a part of our conversation tonight. And at the end of our discussion, our goal and our objective is for each of you to walk out of this auditorium with a much stronger command about the different resources that are available for funding, but then also to be thinking about how you can reassess the old model and think about what's going to be required of you in terms of collaboration, cross-sector, cross-industry collaboration, because that's going to be the thrust of what we talk about here on this stage. So with that, I would love to kick it off. Taya, if you'll please introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, hello, my name is Taya Cassens. I currently work at Medtronic as a research and technology engineer. So what I do is try and find ways to accelerate our funding within our own company, find what's out there, what's new, and what we can hopefully bring into medical devices, specifically what I work in is cardiac rhythm management, but how we can impact more patients. So whether that's a new technology, new sensors, new ways to treat diseases that we've been looking at for years. But I also have worked at Boston Scientific. I've worked outside of the biomedical space, working on military grants. And so work really closely with academia because technology and research is, we look to you to help find those new ideas that can help these patients and bring some of that research to be more translational. So hopefully I can put an industry lens on some of these discussions and keep the conversation going there.
Great. All right, Ishita.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ishita Das, and I'm very excited to be here and to be part of this timely and critical conversation. So I actually went to the exhibit hall earlier today and got a chance to look at some of the posters and saw all the amazing work and innovation that the biomedical engineering field has been doing. And I just wanted to start off by acknowledging that this challenge that's happening puts a lot of pressure on people in this ecosystem at all levels, and so we understand that, and so thank you again to BMES for having this conversation. It's something that I think about every day in my job. And so I'm with the Milken Institute. We are a think tank that is focused on tackling some of the most critical global issues around the world, and we do this by advancing financial, physical, mental, and environmental health and wellness. And I specifically am within the Science Philanthropy Accelerator for Research and Collaboration, or SPARC, which is part of our Milken Institute Strategic Philanthropy pillar. And we advise and work in partnership with a variety of philanthropic organizations. So these are private family foundations, family offices, individual donors, nonprofits. And our focus really is on guiding them to develop strategies, to build and implement giving programs and grant programs, and helping them figure out the best ways to foster collaboration across sectors and disciplines, all with the goal of making sure that folks are living healthy lives and kind of meaningful lives around the world. To put a little bit more flavor on kind of what SPARC does, we focus on working with our philanthropic partners to invest in areas that need attention and resources from philanthropic funding, and nowadays that has kind of grown a lot, clearly. We also highlight the importance of having lived experience and patient perspectives in most of the work that we develop with our philanthropic partners. That's kind of a key core component of what we do. And we have a broad range of portfolio, and so essentially different private foundations come to us, and we have work in neuroscience and brain health and mental health, oncology, rare disease, immunology, computational biology, health equity, and many more. And so we work across all of these entities on a daily basis to try to influence where philanthropic capital and the philanthropic sector can make a difference. So I'm excited to dive a little bit more deeper into what we're seeing are the trends in the philanthropic sector right now and provide some kind of tips on how you all can navigate that.
Awesome, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Liz Noblin. I'm thrilled to be a part of this conversation on behalf of the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, which we call CIRM, just to make it a little bit less of a mouthful. My role specifically, I'm a fellow. I work in program development and portfolio management. So I have a really unique and amazing opportunity to work across all of the different sectors of regenerative medicine that CIRM funds within the state. To give a little bit of history about CIRM, CIRM was born out of a California ballot initiative in 2004 in response to federal restrictions on embryonic stem cell research, which is a very relevant time in history to think back to as it relates to some of the things going on currently in the funding environment. That ballot initiative gave CIRM $3.5 billion to promote the discovery, development, and delivery of regenerative medicine to Californians and to the world. In 2020, an additional state ballot initiative provided another $5.5 billion to CIRM to continue advancing our mission. So CIRM has existed for 20 years, and throughout that time, our approach has been to not only fund the research, but to consider the entire regenerative medicine ecosystem to accelerate and deliver on that mission within California. So in addition to funding basic research, translational research, and clinical trials within the state, we've also funded infrastructure. We fund shared laboratory space, manufacturing space, as well as clinical trial delivery sites throughout the state. And we also prioritize workforce development. We have several training grants that fund students from high school all the way through doctoral or medical studies. And those training grants are building the regenerative medicine workforce that's going to discover, give those therapies to patients, and then continue contributing to that mission. Just to give a little bit of the scope of what we've done in 20 years, we have a portfolio of over 80 diseases where we support active research. I mentioned those clinical trial sites. We've funded 9 of those across the states. We've supported over 4,000 trainees who, many of whom have continued in careers in STEM and supporting patients. In terms of economic impact, we've also led to the formation of over 50 companies and over 50,000 job opportunities within the state of California. So it's been a pleasure to be a part of that journey. I think that the last point that I'll make is that CIRM's funding models are designed to be responsive to the changes that we're seeing, both in terms of innovation and technology, but also what's happening from a regulatory perspective and what the opportunities and challenges are. So almost exactly 1 year ago, our board of directors approved a new, what we call a strategic allocation framework, which provides guidelines for how CIRM will use its remaining funds to promote the science, the infrastructure, and the workforce that allows us to best deliver on our mission. So again, I'm very thrilled to be here today and to be able to teach you a little bit about CIRM and contribute to this conversation.
Great. You know, as I'm listening to my peers and the institutions that they represent, I want to just call out the elephant in the room, if that's okay. I have my disposition is to be really candid, to have a really raw conversation because I think we all deserve it. I'd like to see with a show of hands, I'm really interested in kind of the head and the heart of all the people that are doing all the great research and the great geniuses in the room. How many of you are petrified, in a state of fear? And if you're not comfortable raising your hand because you're so damn afraid, that's okay too. How many folks are really, really afraid of this climate? Yeah. So I just got chills all down my spine looking at all the hands raised. And this is my invitation for all of you. And I have to take my own advice. By the way, I do this every single day. Part of my TEDx talk, how to uncage the confidence within. That whatever challenge, large or small, that we're facing, there is always an opportunity for growth. And that is so foundational. And so where I'd like to have that fear, where I'd like for you to channel that fear in the context of this conversation, is to channel that and say, if I thought trying to crack the code on whatever field you're trying to solve for, if you thought that was challenging, now I got to find funding that completely dried up and is the largest funding source. So I just got a double whammy on my passion and how you want to leave your mark on the planet. So that fear, if we can just channel it and say it's just yet another challenge that I have to overcome because I've got to solve for this larger health problem. this larger societal problem. And so if you can accept that challenge, I want you to be thinking about it in those terms, because it's going to soften the way in which you go after alternative funding sources. I will also say that we have almost 3.5 years. This administration will be termed out. So we also get to contemplate managing our fear, and that's okay, and trying to navigate this landscape, but it does have a shelf life. There is an expiration of 3.5 years, roughly. So think about that too. This is not eternity. There is a starting and an end point to the world as we know it today. So with that, I would love to talk about the strategic partnerships that are going to be so critical in order for us to come together and leverage the philanthropic, the institutions, the private sector, and the traditional funders. And by the way, CIRM is California, so there's no federal affiliation whatsoever. So those billions are not tied to anyone outside of California. I think that's important to note. So let's move the conversation into how important it is for all of the different sectors to come together, pool our resources, but make sure that we're still staying true to our theses. Central to CIRM, everything has got to be related to. So let's talk about that. So tell me how you are moving into that direction with a greater emphasis in this landscape we're in.
Me first?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so thinking from an industry standpoint, we do have to, again, focus on what can be translational. So there's a lot of basic research that I would say industry right now is benefiting from the research that was going on 10 years ago. So we don't want to not do research, because that is a disservice to our patients. But there's still a strategic lens from a technology, from an industry standpoint we do have to put on it to make sure that we're making the biggest impact we can with the small dollars we have. And what partnerships we can make outside of industry that can help de-risk some of these research technology that we can bring to patients as fast as we can. So it's what can we do with the smallest amount of dollars that we have, but has the biggest impact. So putting that strategic lens on it. So when we're thinking about research, how do we bring it? And this is from an industry standpoint right now, I think we do have to focus on what is going to be translational. Industry can supplement some of these dollars. They're not going to replace these multi-million-dollar grants. To be clear, that is not what's going to happen. But I do think from an industry standpoint, the partnerships there can help with some of the workforce development as well. And how do we find opportunities for these people who might want to look outside of academia after the research as well? So putting that lens on things too when we think of this funding.
Great. Ishita, so at the Milken Institute, and in essence, as we were talking backstage in the green room, really serving as a consultant and a strategic advisor to the philanthropic family to counsel them and guide them on how best they can deploy their investment dollars. So talk a little bit for the audience about the role that the Institute plays traditionally, and with this new course correction or redirection, how are you changing the way in which you counsel your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to give a little bit of context of how philanthropic funding has changed and shifted in our country. And so John so eloquently talked about Vannevar Bush's Endless Frontier and how the U.S. funding research ecosystem that, as up until earlier this year that we knew of was founded in order to advance economic growth after World War II. And what we saw that around the mid-1970s, when we're thinking about biomedical research in the US, almost 70% of it was funded through federal funding. And then by around 2016, that had dropped down to nearly 50%, and we saw the philanthropic sector fund around 40% of that research. And that trend kind of has continued. And so while the philanthropic sector has moved into funding more of the research ecosystem that was coupled with public funding not being able to keep up with the advancements that are being made in research across the STEM fields. And so what we are seeing right now is that traditionally, philanthropic funding, specifically within the biomedical sciences, focused on interdisciplinary science, team and collaborative science, and I think philanthropic funding really drove that and did that very well. We also traditionally saw philanthropy put a lot more emphasis on the lived experience and making sure that patients' voices were a part of advisory boards, of review committees, of giving feedback of how the research is affecting them. And I think they're kind of doubling down on that. And so I would encourage folks to lean into learning more about how to engage with patients and engage with the communities you're trying to serve, and how do you do community-centered research or community-led research even, which the public health sector has been doing for a long time, and I think we're seeing a shift of that happening more in the biomedical sciences. And I think that's a place that philanthropy is leading into, because so many of these families are in the philanthropic space because they were personally affected, and they decided to use their own wealth to try to kind of change the ecosystem. We've also, over this past year, we've been having conversations with our philanthropic organizations within our network, as well as university presidents and previous federal leadership, and really trying to think about like what can philanthropy do right now. And one of the things that kind of keeps rising to the top is how to increase the public's trust of science and the understanding. And I think every sector has to play a part in that. And I think what we're seeing with a lot of science and health philanthropies is they're figuring out what that actually means for them, because a lot of them oftentimes stay behind the radar. They're not up close, up in front of people. And so they're trying to figure out how to increase the public's awareness and understanding of how all this research ultimately can impact them and their families and their communities. And so those are, I feel like, some of the things that
I really appreciate, Ishita was talking about the notion that there's a trust deficiency, I think, in society today. And so the idea, certainly what Biomedical Engineering Society wants to do is showcase the stories and really personify the work that you're doing and the work that is so necessary and predicates all of the great solutions that we all benefit from. But without that back-end piece, it's just the attacks on science, the mistrust around research. And I think that public awareness is not something that may be a skill set or something that you contemplate when you're just doing the research and trying to get funding and trying to push out life-saving solutions. So yet that's another element to getting what you're wanting to do out into the market. So how do we kind of, I guess, how do we bring that together, recognizing that that's a key piece to winning the hearts and minds of the consumer, the patient?
Yeah, well, I think as you were saying, Holly and Ishita, it's a skill that needs to be learned. So I think thinking about ways to build that into training opportunities. Through CIRM's, many of CIRM's training programs do have opportunities for internships with industry. We're starting to emphasize internships to build communication skills so that the workforce itself is able to not just do the work, but be the voice of the work and be the voice of the impact, and do that in a way that is relatable to patients and to the public.
Okay, so let's talk about my favorite two letters of the alphabet. Who among you are readily using AI in your work today? All right.
Raise our hands
Yeah.
too.
All right. So we have a struggle at Athena. We have served as a business performance partner for STEM companies for the last 26 years. And a lot of those science and tech companies, I think their lawyers or their general counsel said, hey, we're here to de-risk. We think you need to distance yourself from anything or anyone related to women or gender specific. And that is our mission at Athena, to advance 1 million women in STEM by 2030. So while I totally respect the politics and how that plays out with the decision makers that invest in their workforce, I'm turning to AI, and I'm saying, how am I supposed to solve for this when suddenly I'm running an illegal operation? My mom doesn't like that. My daughter's out in California running an illegal. But seriously, looking into AI and asking, right? I see AI as my thought partner, as my co-founder, as my brainstorming partner, and throwing out and saying, listen, the traditional model is gone as we know it, obliterated for the next 3.5 years. How do I, first of all, build my social skills? How many people feel really confident that they have some top-notch social skills? Let me see a show of hands. I see one. All right. We're going to go for a cocktail after this. Social skills I got. But seriously, this too is, again, another challenge that's inviting you to expand and augment what you think you have to do in order to be a biomedical engineer with impact. And I want you to think about this in the same light that you did when we were navigating the global pandemic, and how much we all grew in the pandemic. Like, we know what we went through. We know what we're made of. And we all proved our resilience because we're all still standing. And I characterize this climate as yet another pandemic. I do. So think about these. Again, they're challenges. And they're opportunities for us to be thinking differently and the way in which we position ourselves in order to do the great work that we all are trained to do. So let's talk about the soft skills, because you talked about, or we did behind backstage, the World Economic Forum said there's going to be forecasted an 80 million global shortfall in the STEM workforce by the end of this year, so about 6 weeks. And there are massive, massive implications for that. And so as I think about the workforce, trying to keep people in the STEM economy, trying to attract more people into the industry, also, although knowing that the funding is dried up. So it's a very tricky set of circumstances. So I think we were talking about how more of the philanthropists or more of the funders are encouraging there to be that collaboration. I don't just want the foundations. I don't just want industry. I want there to be a much bigger interface at levels we've not seen traditionally. Who's going to drive that if that's the new world order?
I can kind of kick that off. I think in terms of thinking about the current and future scientific workforce of the United States, I think traditionally philanthropy has put a lot of funding and resources behind people and on top of research projects. And so I think that's an area where a lot of them see themselves as, this is a really kind of simple way for us to make sure this researcher that we've invested in, say for like 5 years, continues to stay in science and is able to do the work that they need. And if they're a principal investigator, making sure that their team is there. And so I think some of what we're seeing is a lot of bridge funding and stopgap funding and rapid response grants that philanthropic entities are putting out. And oftentimes that really is focused on de-risking to making sure like a postdoc is able to stay in a lab, right? And so that's kind of more at the individual level. And then I think when we're thinking about the workforce as a whole, it's making sure, kind of going back to what I was saying, the team science aspect, and often, and I think a lot of that's on us as the people doing the research to do that, right? So how do you find your collaborators that you worked with a couple years ago or something, right? And there's a computer scientist that you know, and there might be an ethicist that somehow is important for how you're implementing a technology. And it's really forming those teams and then finding the funding opportunities out there that is going to look for those bold ideas. Can I follow up a little bit on the soft skills piece that you mentioned? When I think as people are shifting and pivoting to applying for more philanthropic funding, I think it's important to remember that your proposals and applications really need to be in alignment with the specific foundation's mission, strategic priorities, their goals, and for you to frame the proposal in that way. And what we find in most philanthropic entities is that they're so focused on outcomes and impact. And so, I would recommend framing your research initiative and your aims in a different way than what you would do in an actual federal funding proposal. Think about throwing out your big ideas, like what real world problems are you solving and how will that actually impact patients? These ideas might be really big and high risk, and that's okay, that's what they're looking for. And the applications are usually really streamlined, and so you need to explain to them why your idea is going to have impact, your approach to it in like a very succinct and understandable way that is frankly very different from like an NIH proposal. Yep. And understand that the review process for a lot of foundations is really rigorous. A lot of them have scientific advisory boards, but part of that might be an interview or having a conversation with the funders. And that's kind of the place where a lot of the soft skills come into play, because you need to explain to a person, with your own voice, like why they should be funding this great idea you have, and at the same time, listening to their perspective and the feedback they have, because although they might not technically be like an expert in your eyes, they are an expert probably on the disease or of being a caretaker. And so it's how do you kind of develop those types of communication and relationship skills and infuse that into the ethos of your proposals. And those are, I think we often see a lot of those proposals are the ones that get funded, if that's helpful.
No, I was just thinking about, I could feel the heart, the blood pressure going up. It's like, oh my gosh, you want me to go in there and defend this? No, now you want me to have a conversation and debate this verbatim on the principles that are stand out on my application. This to me just guides you more into a new area of passion. It's like it's not enough to use AI to have this great strategic application, but I actually have to go in and connect with the funder and articulate in no uncertain terms about the impact and the potential and notwithstanding the risk. And I like that. I really like that guidance for the audience. Liz, what do you say?
Well, I was going to add on to the point about team science, because I think that's a really fantastic point. The way that comes through at CIRM is that a lot of our funding opportunities are designed to encourage team science. And this isn't just teams of academic investigators, but partnerships with industry as well. And the way that we think about this is it's a way to really bring out where both of those sectors shine. The academic investigator, like especially when we're thinking about cutting edge cell and gene therapies, they're thinking about network knowledge. They're thinking about like, well, what have I learned here? Who else needs to know what I've learned, and how can that collective knowledge help the entire field move forward? And then on the other side, the industry partner is thinking about, at the end of the day, this treatment needs to get to patients. And I know how to do that. I know how to plan for access, plan for affordability, and engage the right people to ensure that this gets to the patients who need it at the end of the day. So I think thinking about team science from that perspective of bringing to light what each party brings to really advance the science is really critical as well.
And I want to build on that too with some of the things we're seeing in industry. There's always been an emphasis in that team science, but I definitely see that a lot more in the current standpoint, where there is a lot more encouragement to have those partnerships between industry and academia or smaller startups as we put proposals through. I also want to throw, as we talk about this team science, one thing that another tool you're going to have to work through or challenge is communicating early on those partnerships. There's a lot of red tape to have those partnerships to even put proposals through. Some things, not only are you in charge of figuring out your research and making it now translatable to what the outcomes are going to be and thinking about the patient, but now that red tape of how do we work through even the IP challenges between the academia and industry partners, pulling in the right people early so when those proposals come out, you're ready and you can go forward and forget about that red tape. It's some of just that back end stuff you got to overcome as well.
You know, as I think about all that's expected of all of you to bring great science to the patients, and the challenges that we're talking about here, are folks turned on by this? But is the instinct? I want to get some engagement from the audience. I'd like to get some feedback and get a sense of where you are and how this is landing for you. Is there anybody that's interested in standing up and sharing your story on having received funding and now at this crossroads? Anybody have some social skills, soft skills they would like to showcase? Going once, going twice.
Oh,
yes.
Yep, it's hard to see.
Okay, there's a woman right behind you to the other side. Great. And if you will, please introduce yourself, your organization, and proceed with the question, if you will.
Hi, my name is Mitra Hartman. I'm the chair of biomedical engineering at Northwestern University.
Nice.
And I wonder if the panel has any words of wisdom for laboratories who are focused more on the basic research rather than having a translational element. Because as was pointed out earlier, it is so essential to continue to do this basic research, even in the face of these funding deficits. And it's the basic research now that will be driving the translational components 10, 15, 50 years down the road. What sort of things can we do? What sort of opportunities can we make for the members of my department who do more basic research?
Yeah. Great question.
So I can kick things off from the CIRM perspective. So CIRM does provide funding for basic and foundational research. And I think the guidance would be to find your niche and find what funders are most aligned with your activities and the type of research that you're doing. I think as Holly mentioned, CIRM is focused on California, focused on basic science, basic research that's going to promote access, the next wave of innovative regenerative medicine therapies. That's our niche, but we are not the only funding agency with that kind of specificity or that kind of focus.
Any other comments?
It's hard, coming from the industry standpoint again, I mean, it's hard, some of this basic research, and again, this tight landscape of funding, being able to at least articulate where you think or when you think it might become more translational does help build the case for why we want to fight to continue with funding some of these basic science questions.
Yeah, I would say, I think oftentimes people maybe think that foundations don't necessarily fund basic science because a lot of the times the websites are very clear, like we're focused on patients and ultimately what impacts them. But if you go into their actual funding opportunities, you'll see that so much of what they're focused on is finding the mechanism for a neurodegenerative disease, right, which can eventually lead to therapeutic development. And so it's, I think it's like trying to find those pockets of funders kind of across the industry that really understand the focus of basic science and the application of it, and just the foundational research as a whole. And I would say just, from a family foundation perspective, most of them understand. They've been in it for so long that they get the importance of basic science, and so if you start having conversations with them, you'll align pretty quickly, I think.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes, please. I think Kristen's going to come. She's got her running shoes on.
Hello. Okay. I have a question about deliverables. So in industry, typically...
Would you mind introducing yourself and your organization?
I'm Joseph Rich. I'm a new faculty. Started 3 months ago at Brigham Young University. So with regards to deliverables, at least to my understanding, industry funding opportunities usually have tight deliverables and the type of translational technology you're making. With regards to philanthropic funding, are those deliverables as tight in terms of technologies that are made, as opposed to like federal funding, where it's like you're funded to do this project, and then you'll see over time the progress of it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think some of it depends on the foundation and how they craft their grant terms. But I would say, I think from what we've seen is that a lot of these private family foundations are very invested, and so you might have to do, give short progress reports every few months, not every few months, like a couple times a year. And that really is where you explain, this is what we thought we were going to do, but we're not going to hit this milestone because the research took us in a different direction. And usually they understand, right, because there isn't necessarily like a bottom line that they're going after, right? They understand that you have to follow the research and the data where it takes you. And so I would say, I think, look at them as similar to federal funding, like, you talk to your program officers. It's like talk to the people at the foundation as you're seeing shifts in your research.
Yes, so my name's Tamara Bainham, and I am an independent medical device research consultant, and I work primarily with startup companies who rely heavily on non-dilutive funding from the federal government. So that sector is really starting to get hit hard. So my question is there a place where people can go to search out opportunities from foundations, small family offices, similar to what there is for like grants.gov, for instance, for federal funds?
The short answer is no. I think I think what we usually tell folks is, frankly, I would use like AI to start being like, what are foundations that are focused on this specific disease or this specific area? And then as you find a few, you will be able to kind of see where the rest are. I think we obviously have a group of funders that are in our network. I think when they have funding opportunities, we post them in our LinkedIn. So it's not a comprehensive by any means, but it's comprehensive of the people in our network. And so anyone's, feel free to follow us on our LinkedIn. There's other kind of conglomerates of foundations and family foundations. And so those lists might be helpful. I know some societies often have lists. I'm not sure if BMES does, but that's also kind of another way to find them. But there isn't one. And part of the reason is because foundations are formed and then they kind of go away, and there isn't like an entity that is responsible for putting it all together that's available to the broad public.
I know. I Googled and I was like, okay, now that diversity is illegal and inclusion is illegal, who's going to be interested in filling this void? And I went on to AI, and there was 20 family foundations, philanthropic foundations. Then it says, hey, Holly, do you want me to put together a pitch deck for you? Hey, Holly, do you want me to go ahead and send this pitch? I mean, it was amazing in 35 seconds. And I was like, okay. So again, encourage you to obviously use that to the extent you can. But then ultimately, as I understand it, a lot of times when these grants go out, you're invited to apply for them rather than kind of cold, but it's not going to stop me, and I hope it doesn't stop you. The gentleman over there to the right.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much. I am Hassan Bukhari. I am working as a postdoc at Cleveland Clinic. So I have a question regarding fundings. Like there are a lot more people who are postdoc especially are suffering a lot because of that lack of funding. We are a bit safe because of the Cleveland Clinic. They have a lot more things like regarding, but several people I know. So as an industrialist, what you people are planning? Like you are planning to or like have some plans like to provide some funding on those ideas which are more like innovative and these type of thing, like because in this stage I think industry should come, I guess. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so looking for sort of ideas and how funding models and opportunities can change for innovation. I think the California state propositions that led to the formation of CIRM were very specific on what the Institute is expected to deliver. And so we always have to look back to those propositions to sort of set the guardrails for where we can expand and where our focus needs to be. That said, we really stay responsive and adaptive, both to the needs of researchers and to changes and evolution in the landscape. I mean, I can say very recently we had a round of basic science applications that our board was able to double the amount of funding specifically in response to the need that they were hearing from the state. And we're glad we were able to do it. We also recognize it was not a solution for everyone, and it was it was kind of what we were able to do in that context. So I think a huge part of what we'll do going forward and what we have done historically is just to keep listening and remain responsive and adaptive, but again, always within the bounds of what is our mission and what are our mandates as set out in the state propositions.
I do know that some foundations, because they are flexible and agile, and that's one of the great things about philanthropic funding, that they're able to restructure grants that are existing. So if there is a postdoc that needs more support, they can reallocate funding to help them. And I think those types of conversations, you have to kind of initiate it. So if you already have a grant like that, it's just asking to say, is there flexibility? There might be flexibilities in changing other grant terms or the duration of the grant. And so that is very much something that foundations are able to do and I think are willing to do, especially right now, if that's helpful.
Any other questions? Gentleman in the front row.
Hi, I'm Walt. I work for the same medical device company as Taya. But I was on a training grant as a graduate student, and like many people in the room here, we've all benefited from federal funding. And the panel started with this wonderful presentation by BMES launching a new initiative to kind of get out and talk about wins, right? Talk about the way people in this room have changed the world. And maybe I just wanted to, I know it's great to talk about alternative funding mechanisms, but what's clear is that industry and foundations and state level initiatives aren't going to fill this gap.
Yep.
So I wanted to know if people on stage had any kind of unique ideas for leveraging the voices of people out here, right? People like me who actually don't get NIH money, but benefit because downstream are these fantastic pacemakers and glucose monitors and drugs and biologics. So that's what I would ask.
Yeah.
Any ideas? I know I'm going to put the QR code on my social media for sure for the new BMES initiative, but anything else you've got?
I know, where to start? I mean, this isn't going to be the shining light answer, but at the end of the day, the patients will always be there. So I think, how can you relate to patients? How can you talk about the importance of what you're doing and where the ideas come from for patients? I think that would be one suggestion. Would love to hear any others.
I mean, this isn't a new idea, but a lot of associations do Hill Days, which is more focused on policy. I wonder if there can be like similar initiatives that are less to policymakers, but go to different kind of places where communities gather, things like that. I think this science communication world probably does this a lot. And I think probably we can learn from some of those initiatives.
If I'm not mistaken, I think you were trying to say, how can we be better storytellers and really penetrate, getting outside of the science community and more so just into the common, sort of the larger community. And I think that is our power. I think that is the ultimate agency. And if we're not telling our story and we're not personifying why we do what we do and how critical it is that funding is available, then take that up with the patients, right? To the people that are taking away the funding. Then you are held accountable. So there needs to be this equation, this formula of accountability and transparency. So to the extent that you are doing your work and you're looking for collaborators and you're trying to, rejuvenate your, find your inner soft skills or your inner extrovert, getting on social media and telling your story, because that's where we're going to get, that's the far-reaching tentacles. And letting the patients, the potential patients or the family members of patients going, I just heard Kendra on this LinkedIn file or this Instagram or whatever channel, and she's doing great research, except for she had to stop because the funding dried up. And I can't wait to get over this gap so I can help your sister, brother, uncle, father. And literally, that's just your story. It's your nugget, and it's your piece that needs to be disseminated, needs to be communicated. And so, in effect, while there's these big monster organizations, long-standing institutions, big pharma, big medical device, there's the patient population, and that's every one of us. I know, 2 out of 5 people are going to get a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime. So nobody's getting out. Nobody's getting out of this. And the work that you're doing and the way that you're doing it, it cannot be a best-kept secret here in the Hilton Auditorium.
If I could just add on to that, it is getting to work with patient advocates it's a privilege. They are powerhouses. What we've seen through CIRM is numerous stories of parents of kids born with rare diseases who just through sheer force of will go out and raise hundreds of thousands of dollars and build their own teams to develop personalized medicines. It's incredible and it's inspiring what they can do. So I think to connect with those patients and their advocates and tap into that power and that drive that they have is only going to amplify the voices here.
I also wonder how many kind of universities or training programs have that lay audience communication training. I know I was lucky when I was getting in graduate school, I had a course like that, and so I was writing my thesis and taking that course over the summer at the same time, and so I was going like very deep in, but then also at the end had to give a talk about my research at a bar. And I think, I'm sure there are universities that do that, and so I think putting yourself out there and taking part in those courses, and there's like nerd nights and things like that that happen, and that it helps, right? It helps you figure out like, how do I make my research connect with a person that I met at the bar or that's walking down the street, and that then infuses this understanding of the scientific process and what research means for us as a society that we're clearly missing. And I love, Holly, what you were saying, and I think, some holidays are coming up, it's the end of the year, that's a great time to like try it out.
I think we do sometimes take for granted how smart we are and how sometimes people don't understand what we're talking about. So I love the idea of being able to just distill it into something that your uncle or your cousin can understand at the holiday table, because the second they understand what you're doing and what like meaningful it is, it does spread that and helps other people understand that, yeah, this research does matter. And even though it might not be translating to something today, again, it's that 15 years down the road when this might be this disruptive thing that's helping so many more people.
And I like the challenge that the gentleman in the front row offered up, which is basically, not only do you get to be a biomedical engineer in this era when disease in all of its forms are just, it's so prolific, with the standard American diet, with the mental health. I mean, we need you more than we've ever needed you. And on top of your brilliance and your drive and your ambition, we're now asking you to also develop and flex that muscle and being an advocate for why your work deserves to be funded. As a societal, advocating to society and making that case. And I think that's probably gonna be one of the biggest advantages that you can carve out for yourself as we navigate this wild, wild west that we're living in. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, please, in the back. She's right there to your left. Yes.
This is on. There it is. Samir Gadiali, I'm the chair of biomedical engineering at Ohio State University. I really like this concept of communicating, the impact of our work. But let me make a suggestion. So you asked about universities that do this. I think one of the problems that we have as scientists is we have been trained to communicate in a certain way, and it comes off as threatening when we go out into the public, right? And so at Ohio State, we have a college, it's called the John Glenn College of Public Affairs. Mm-hmm. And we've started to work with our colleagues over there because they are the ones that are actually trained to talk about these complex issues, but in a public affairs sense. Yeah. And I'm sure most of our universities have similar, especially the land-grant institutions have something similar. So I'm not trying to advocate my responsibility to communicate, but I almost wonder if we need to do this in partnership with the experts that know how to communicate in public affairs. And so that may be, because otherwise it seems a little bit too daunting for us as scientists to just go out into the public. We need some help. We need some partners to go out and do it with.
And I love that. It's a difference. I started my career as a journalist, reporter, and anchor, and I always wanted to make sure that my message when I went on air was landing with the person in the back of the room, the lowest common denominator, because the message, nobody is immune from the message. And if that's the goal, if you want to, show your intellectual, and I know the intellectual superiority that exists in some of the universities, that is, the intellectualism is their currency. And then they get outside of that bubble, and it's like, wait a minute, what about the other 8 billion people who have no idea what I'm talking about? I could be talking, Russian. And so I think that's another challenge, and certainly this president has completely rewritten the communication style, where everything is going to be messaged in 2 and 3 words. That's it. and we have seen its effectiveness. And so there's an opportunity for us, again, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Who are we doing it for? And who's letting the ultimate beneficiary or the recipient know why this isn't going to come to market in the absence of funding? And building that momentum, I think, is a really smart play. Are there any other questions from our audience? Yes, in the second row.
Hi, my name is Raj Tokar. I'm a recent graduate from an undergraduate program, and I'm doing research in neurosurgery, and we're essentially building devices. So it's translational research. And as I'm applying to grad school, I realized that not only me, but many like me are worried that how will we be supported in times like these if we apply to grad school with our time and energy and effort, countless years going behind. Will it be worth at the end? And will we essentially get enough support and funding from the community to kind of stand up and put our research out there to really help people?
Yeah. Who wants to tackle that one? The crystal ball.
Yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it? I mean, I think it's first just so important to acknowledge that I'm sure that fear and that uncertainty is really common, especially when it comes to, like, you know, you're looking at a 5, 6, hopefully not more, but maybe more program, and what is that runway going to look like? So I think, you know, Holly's message that, like, this is not forever. There is going to be an end date is important to keep in mind. You know, I wonder, but I'm not sure about this, if there are sort of foundation or alternative funding models that are opening up for trainees as well. You know, I think we typically think about, oh, the PI of the lab is the one who, you know, goes out, gets support. I don't know if there are other opportunities opening up in that manner, but that, you know, I think if what you're proposing to do your research on is well aligned with an institute or a foundation or a society's goals, that might be a way to really dig into that and pursue that, you know, more specific channel for support.
I think there's also opportunities within industry internships too, to help in some of the summer or those sorts of things. Co-ops are always great too, as a way to help with the sort of getting your feet wet in industry while still being able to do your research. So it's always a good place to look for some of those opportunities as well.
All right, any other questions?
Hi, here.
Yes, please.
My name is Bhushan Kharbikar. I'm a scientist at University of California, San Francisco. I really like the point what Professor at Ohio State made, but I want to add another aspect to it. As a scientist, we are being trained to not exaggerate our work. Even when we write our own research article, we've been writing or making claim extremely conservative, in an extremely conservative way.
Yeah.
And what I observed, how the influencing work is, we are doing a lot of exaggeration. And I see a clear...
You're being kind, by the way.
So I really don't know how we should, you know, go about doing this influencing without, you know, without exaggeration, which is completely seems like out of our realm, to be very frank.
That is a powerful question, and I appreciate it. I'm thinking of Elizabeth, what's Elizabeth's name? Elizabeth Holmes, who spit out a couple of babies sitting in prison, and she took a page from the playbook in Silicon Valley, where, you know, hyperbole is how it works for billions and billions of dollars. And then of course we see the policymakers, and they just bold-faced lie. They're eating the dogs. I digress. Okay, but I love that question, and I don't want to make light of it because you do make a very salient point, trying to be very, very conservative and not going overboard and losing the trust, because that trust is what we're grappling with right now. We're grappling with, vaccines. We're grappling with COVID. I mean, all of that. Are you the enemy? What are you talking about? Are we the enemy? So, what are your thoughts, panelists? Sorry.
I think you have to learn. I think that has been sort of the theme in this messaging around communication and becoming better communicators and advocates, is that it's not natural. And so I think the Ohio State example is fantastic. Get paired up with an expert who will help you refine that message and who will help you learn that skill and learn how to navigate that balance. It has to be an intentional skill that gets built.
And knowing the audience who you're presenting it out to as well, and what how they're trying to absorb the information, making sure that it's playing into their points is a good way to start thinking of how you even want to present it.
And I think the other piece is trying to articulate how uncertain science is and that it's constantly changing, and that we clearly have not done that well, and that was not done well during the pandemic. And so I think even if you are making maybe kind of overstatements or generalizations, trying to also infuse the fact that research is uncertain, this is all being developed, and kind of infusing that. And maybe that'll help, the feelings you have, you'll offset that a little bit. And I think, it's really easy to kind of say, go to these trainings and things, but you all have mentioned, these trainings, the good training programs have to exist, and they don't, I don't think. So I went to University of Michigan, and I love that Ohio State is doing that. I think the training that I did in science communication at U of M was also unique in that same way, where they brought in an acting coach, and they brought in expertise from these other entities that are focused on talking to people a lot more. And so I think maybe if universities, I know universities are trying to do so much right now, and it's hard, but I think putting a little bit of emphasis on real training of what it looks like to be a good communicator is important right now.
I would also offer up on the AI topic. So there are a plethora of AI tools on research, drug discovery, the pitching, all of that. There's one AI tool called Genee, Genee, and it is a coach, and it role plays with you, and then it challenges you. You're talking over my head, you're talking at me, you're not talking to me, you're not making the right case. This needs to be clear, it needs to be more succinct, and it role plays back and forth. So Athena, we're gonna be partnering with the company and bringing that to all of the members that make up Athena. So I would definitely encourage you to do that. The other thing when you're pitching and trying to be a straight shooter is bring in humor. Being so honest and say, listen, I'm not going to be Elizabeth Holmes here. I want your $5 billion secretary. What was it, Howard? Anyway. And going, but here's the potential, here's the upside, and here's the timeline that we see as possible. And when you're going into the scientific and getting in all the vernacular and all the, that's when you're losing your audience. And I think talking more conversationally and aspirationally, it elicits more trust. But try Genee on the role play and the coach role playing, and see if there's some traction there for you. Okay, anyone else in the audience? Yes, the patient gentleman in the front.
Yeah, my name is Suping Lu, the same institute of Taya. So I guess I keep thinking about it, even we have a problem today with government funding, but eventually there's still the major one, or maybe one of the major one. We thought 3 years later, maybe things come back to normal. My question is, we expect to be the same normal as we today, or different normal, or new normal in the future. So my question for you is, do you think we should think about the future government funding mechanism, application or focus, would it be different or not? If different, what we should prepare today and make it better in the future?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think, assuming this challenging period comes to somewhat of an end, you can't go back to what it used to be, because I think we saw how fragile this whole ecosystem was, relying solely on federal funding for a lot of places. So I think university leadership, from the folks that we've talked to, they're thinking about this very thoughtfully and strategically. A lot of them have had to go into their endowments and things like that. And so I think they're thinking a little bit differently about the funding structures and their funding sources. So I think, hopefully encourage more institutions to do that, assuming we kind of come out of this. I think the other thing maybe I wanted to highlight, which isn't directly related to your question, but the other kind of major consequence that has resulted from a lot of these changes from the federal government is all the anti-diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. And I think we can't lose sight of how harmful all of that is, and the progress that we've made, even within the last 5 years, is at risk of not advancing. And that leads to science not being inclusive, not being for everyone, and ultimately impacts so many communities that have been marginalized and under-resourced for decades. And so I think where you can, kind of leaning into still trying to advance those pieces and focusing on making health equity a priority, where luckily there are some foundations that are leaning in and holding strong, and so looking for those voices out there, because that also is kind of a new normal where we will have communities that have kind of fallen more and worse than they were kind of before this time, that will need extra help. And so just thinking about that also in terms of thinking forward is important.
Yeah, and if that's the thesis, if that's where you're focused or want to include that as a focus, then it becomes much more attractive for institutions like McKinsey, Bezos Foundation, Melinda Gates Foundation. I mentioned earlier, I just put into AI and I was like, who are the institutions, the family foundations, family funds that are still investing in women's health, women's research, and it spit out 20 of these institutions, the contact name, the email name, and then my pitch. So just different ways to kind of re-engineer the way in which you're trying to package your funding case. Look at the folks that are funding and have billions of dollars, and of course, they're women that are wanting to put money back into the community and help these underserved communities. So that might be another angle for you to consider that would really align with where they're focusing. I know I was working with the First Lady, the Governor, California First Partner, and she had indicated that there was a all-out erasure of all women's health, women's research, women's reference within the federal government, deleting it from the DoD, certain divisions, and the Department of Defense, obviously the NIH, FDA. And so there was a group under the Aspen Institute. There was a group out of Switzerland that came over and stood up a database to help rebuild or retain all of that rich research so that it wasn't lost in this dark time that we're in. So just be thinking about how you can seize the opportunity, because obviously necessity is the mother of all invention. We have massive gaps here. So that's where the engineering brains that are in this room get to think about cracking this problem in a completely different way. And then also playing it out, look into the future, reverse engineer, we've got this gap. Okay, the clock is ticking, we've got 3.5 years. We pray that there's a different world order in 3.5 years. So how can I bake that into my strategy? How can I bake that into the people that I'm trying to ally with? I think there's an opportunity here, and I know it's dark, and I know it feels heavy, and it is, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. And all of the work that you're doing and curing these diseases and these rare diseases, to the average bear, it is impossible. But there's no average bear in here. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, the gentleman to my right.
Hello. Hi, I'm Hassan. I'm from Cleveland Clinic. Just a comment from the previous question, you also suggested to advertise your achievement. I think the main issue which I found, even 30 to 40% talks are AI-based. Even I'm also using machine and deep learning models. The main issue is explainability. Like we used to deal on daily basis clinicians, and we used to explain them in layman language. So even in the talks, I realized that explainability, we are still considering machine learning, deep learning is a black box. Okay, it's a black box, but we should learn how to explain it to layman. The same applies to when we are posting on our social media. Yep. We should explain it as a layman. Like you will not understand, for example, my main technical area. I should explain. So I think university should focus to guide and coach students to learn these skills, I guess. I mean, that's my suggestion. I can be wrong as well, but that's I observed.
Okay. Great. All right. Anyone else? We just have a few minutes here. Yes, in the back, I believe we have a question.
Hi, my name is Jenny. I'm a senior undergrad at Georgia Tech. I'm just very curious, what are some skills you think would be vital for graduating senior and thriving in this new funding environment?
So one, and this was a little bit, I don't know if anyone in here was at the industry networking event last night, but I think going forward, research and work will be done as a team. And I think look for opportunities to be part of a team and work as part of a team, whether that's teaming up with someone in the lab to do a collaborative project together, or joining a student group or organization to solve a problem as a team. And I think by doing that, just the opportunity to do that, it will kind of spiderweb into communication skills, teamworking skills, project planning skills. Like it gives you the opportunity to build a really diverse skill set that I think will serve you in so many ways going forward.
I would also say leverage that network of alumni, that Georgia Tech has a very rich network of alumni, especially in industry and other research places, and leveraging that to help build those skills that you might need, or even help pave your way into some of these other areas you might not have originally had an opportunity, whether it's internships, co-ops, research, and leverage that network, and even the people here that you're meeting at these conferences.
And I would say that the soft skills development, all the CEOs that I work with at Athena, who are corporate partners of the organization, they come to us for the development of their female leaders and their male allies. And what they're all talking about inside the boardroom is that soft skills is the new gold rush. And with AI, obviously, going mainstream, there is a big, big need for soft skills to understand and relate to people, to read the room, to find when there's something that's a disconnect, where there may be workflow optimization, but there's not a people optimization. So I would challenge you as you think about, and you're getting off of the university, and congratulations to you on your graduation into this very disorienting world, which means you're just going to thrive because you're coming in building that resilience right out the gate. But the soft skills development, I cannot stress enough for you to really focus on that. And part of the soft skills is going to events like this and networking and getting comfortable with talking about yourself. Hey, I'm doing this work. I'm really excited, but I'm also scared shitless. What are we gonna do? What are you doing? Like just being really candid and just being open and honest. And then people are like, oh my God, she said exactly what I'm feeling. You know, we should hang out. Well, I'm working with somebody who, and that's how these conversations evolve when you're just being honest and open and not playing small and timid. And I think if you can work towards that, it'll pay dividends, certainly as you enter the workforce and looking for opportunities and team science.
I want to build on that AI comment, though. I was actually surprised how not everyone had their hand up when about using AI. And I would actually encourage you to lean into it in a smart way. I saw multiple tracks showing how we got to be cautious with leveraging models, and some are better than the others. But even if you looking at the research funding opportunities and you see what's out there, a majority of them have aspects of AI built into them as well. So being able to lean into it in a smart and responsible manner, I think is going to also be critical looking towards either funding models or just even workflow optimization, getting into learning a coach, this Genie thing. This is the first time I heard of it. And what an awesome thing I didn't even think of looking at. So leaning into it, because I don't see it going away in the near term. So finding ways to use it responsibly is going to be important.
And Athena has an AI leadership masterclass. So if anybody's interested in that program, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, Holly Smithson, and I'm happy to direct you. I'm feeling my soft skills. I'm getting a sense that John wants us to wrap this up. Situational awareness is in effect. Let's give it up to our fabulous panelists and our great engaging audience. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I just want to say that it's great to see so many people here who are proactively interested in helping to solve this issue, which is that your cheese has been moved, and now you have to learn how to deal with a new reality. So I think this is a great first step that you guys have taken to be here. I think the conversation was absolutely terrific. It's also very reinforcing to me to hear some of the comments from Holly and the group and some of you. This is what our campaign is about. It's a public awareness campaign. Even though we're leading it, this is not about BMES. This is about biomedical engineering. So I encourage all of you to become active and really get behind this coalition. So with that pitch, I do want to thank Holly and the team for a magnificent conversation. So how about one last round of applause? Thank you all very much.